What is going on, everybody? Hopefully, guys are doing well out there. That is right. We are back in podcast form here on Sports Card Radio. It's only fitting that we return to our roots as it relates to podcasting here at Sports Card Radio, considering Sports Card Radio is home of the longest lasting podcast in existence. I remember way back when, all the way back in 2008, before a lot of people even knew what a podcast was. I sat down and recorded my first couple of episodes of what would be known as the Sports Card Show. Over the years, the podcast took on many forms, sometimes talking about the different news and different happenings in the hobby. And then later on, starting to talk about some of the shadiness and the scandals and the scary characters that are in the sports card world. Then I took a little bit of a break right around the pandemic time. I decided to take a little bit of a break, focus my efforts on something maybe bigger, a bigger opportunity, if you will, than sports trading cards. Now, interestingly enough, sports trading cards really took off during obviously that 2020 period all the way to like 2022, 23. But I ended up focusing on the stock market, which also had its own kind of influx of new people looking to invest, and really carved out an awesome career and a great kind of financial opportunity for me here on YouTube and elsewhere. Parlayed it actually into a really nice career and a nice job that I took earlier this year as well. It was all based on switching over to finance YouTube. Well, I decided, what do I want to do with Sports Card Radio? We come on here every Thursday. We have our live, and that's obviously a great time. It's a great interactive time. We kind of, there's a little bit of debauchery, a little bit of name calling and fooling around, and that's certainly going to be the theme of that live show. But I thought, well, I could do these kind of edited videos, but man, that actually takes a lot of work. I think probably what I'm best at is just turn on the microphone and start talking. And so these podcasts, we're going to be uploading them here on YouTube, but they'll also go out on the main Sports Card Show feed that if you're still subscribed to, well, pat yourself on the back. You've sat through about a year and a half, 2 years of virtually no uploads. So I'm going to send that out to that. That'll get out to your Apple podcast feeds, your Spotify's, those types of things, wherever people are listening to podcasts these days. But more specifically here on YouTube, if you are watching on YouTube, there will be some visual effects as well. We'll have some tabs up. We'll walk through our different topics, and you'll be able to maybe see some graphics and maybe better explanation of what we are going to be talking about on today's show. And that's probably where we'll kick things off is, what are we going to be talking about on today's show? Well, first topic that we'll talk about is the Anthony Richardson maybe auto pen scandal happening over at Panini. Now, according to a user on Twitter named John Ban 237, he pulled an Anthony Richardson autograph and he sent it to PSA. PSA declined to authenticate the card based on the autograph potentially not being real. So we'll talk about that. We have a statement from PSA. For those of you that don't remember the Dak Prescott autograph scandal, maybe we'll talk a little bit about that as well. On our Thursday night live stream, we talked about Joe Clemons. I believe I think he even still works for Leaf. He's a former employee of Beckett as well. Brian Gray tuned into our Thursday night live stream where we talked about Clemons and a little bit about Brian Gray, basically saying, guys, I think it's time to open up and talk about that. Well, I did get a message from Brian, and we'll read that on today's program. We'll also talk about Slick Rick Probstein 123, the consignment seller on eBay, who still, I don't think even has a website to manage his auctions. I mean, I know we're really low budget over here at Sports Card Radio, but Rick Probstein probably even takes the cake at being even lazier and lower budget in terms of things. And he's also lazy as it relates to checking the items that he is auctioning off. This guy, if you sent him dog poop slabbed by HGA, he'd probably list it and take the commission. So you had a Javier Leggett signed 2023 Contenders rookie ticket auto PSA 10, unfortunately, it looks like maybe the card and the PSA slab it is in is fake. Now, every single major sports index as it relates to the value of trading cards, those are down over the last year. I don't have it up here because I'm not currently logged in, but even over the last couple of months, most card prices are actually trending lower. It doesn't take me to tell you that. And maybe some of you need to tune into Jeff Wilson's program for him to tell you that basically all trading cards over the last year have gone down. Now, I think there are some exceptions to that. Look like the Star Wars index and maybe some other indexes, entertainment index was actually higher over the last year. But the vast majority of trading cards have actually continued to drop in value over the last year. But you still have people that are charging for picks. Now, they had to put this on sale. Used to be a $4,000 per year package. Now, the low price of $2,000, folks, you can get an ultra high-end membership to Sportscardinvest. We'll talk about if this, first of all, what do you get for $2,000 of sports card investing advice? And if something like this is even legal to do. Now, CJ Stroud is the golden boy in the hobby as it relates to football this year. Pretty much everybody is now a CJ Stroud fan, and they're trying to pull his cards out of box breaks. It certainly had a great season, but in the off season is when we see these young men kind of fall into the traps, and the traps could be none other than Amber Rose. Formerly used to date, I believe, Mr. Kanye West, among others. Rose is 40 years old and has recently been seen leaving hotel rooms with Mr. CJ Stroud. CJ Stroud also partying with Travis Scott. He's been in the Super Bowl booth that was put together by Robert Kraft and Michael Rubin. So we'll see if CJ Stroud's summer of fun means he has a sophomore slump in the NFL. Now, we've got a big NFL draft coming up. I think we're still a couple of months away, maybe a month or two away from the NFL draft, but this is going to be one of the more offensive heavy NFL drafts that we've seen in a while. Top 3 picks is what I've been seeing are going to go quarterback. So you should have Caleb Williams and then a combination of either Drake May or Jalen Daniels go in the second and third pick. The best pick in the NFL draft is probably Marvin Harrison Jr. He'll probably actually slip to the 4th pick, which I think is held by the Arizona Cardinals. I tell you what, Kyler Murray's career has been a little up and down. And for a guy his size, not surprisingly, he's gotten hurt a few different times and just really has had trouble completing seasons. Also, I think anytime Call of Duty comes out, his play tends to slip as well. But pair him with a talent like Marvin Harrison Jr., and he could put up some decent statistics. But there's other quarterbacks as well. You got Michael Penix out of Washington, Bo Nix, J.J. McCarthy from the national champion Michigan Wolverines, Michael Pratt, among others. I've seen mock drafts where you have 5, 6, 7 quarterbacks maybe going in the first round. And there's multiple wide receivers. There'd probably be a running back or 2 sprinkled in there. Also be interesting to see, obviously, this year you had Fanatics sign a lot of the top picks to autograph exclusives. My guess is that's probably something that will happen again as we head into next year. And then we got to talk about, we've been carving out a little bit of a niche, buying and selling products. And like I said earlier, a lot of the sports cards, they've just continued to trend down. Now, there's still opportunities to profit there, but where I've actually found more areas to profit are your non-sports items. Has a broader appeal. I know sports and sports cards obviously have gotten more popular over the past couple of years, but there's categories like entertainment and movies and music that are even bigger from a popularity perspective. Now, this doesn't really fall into that category. You got a Louis Vuitton 25th anniversary miniature Windows computer, but on a site like Golden, that went for about $150 cheaper than it should have. Talk about some of the other purchases we have and also a recent sale illustrating the fact that some of this entertainment and movie stuff is certainly good, quote, investment, certainly something you can make money off. So let's kick off today's show. Again, I'm sitting around, I'm wondering, what am I going to do with Sports Card Radio? How am I going to contribute? How can I be a better asset to the brand known as Sports Card Radio? I wanted to come back really back to the podcast scene. It is something that, again, I got my start on in 2008. I remember this was like in the summertime of 2008. And Ryan and I had kind of tossed around the idea of maybe starting a podcast maybe a little sooner than that. But as 2008 is rolling on, you're kind of in that great financial crisis time period. People aren't really spending a lot of money on discretionary stuff like baseball cards, and certainly baseball cards weren't nearly as popular as they are today. And certainly every year or so that goes by, baseball cards get incrementally more popular. So certainly back in 2008, not nearly as popular as they are today. And so sales at the shop were struggling. We were right here in the Central Valley, which was one of the hardest hits from the great financial crisis. There was a lot of money that came in for real estate building and construction and all that type of stuff. And all that money basically got wiped out during the great financial crisis. And so my idea was like, I'm going to set up a podcast. I was like, I'm pretty sure we're going to close our store, but we still had great connections online. We were still selling stuff on eBay. In fact, eBay was probably one of the reasons why our doors stayed open as long as they did, because sales were still strong on eBay. You could still liquidate and sell stuff, all the time on eBay. eBay was actually even more popular and a bigger e-commerce presence in the world back then, maybe even slightly larger than Amazon at that time. And so I thought, well, we'll start this podcast and it'll be a great way to connect with people, be a great way to kind of continue the brand and move forward and continue to sell items. And maybe we don't have a shop, but we can keep selling online. Well, it ended up morphing into Sports Card Radio, which if you're watching here on YouTube, has taken on many forms over the years, but there's a lot of useful content on here. There's, probably thousands of baseball and football card checklist on here where you can find the sets. We were one of the first sites that actually put up this type of content. Obviously, there was the podcast. More recently, my brother's been putting up the Sports Card Show calendar. This is one of the probably more popular features of the website these days, is you can kind of come on here and, depending on what day it is, figure out if there's a card show in your area. All of this is free of charge, free use, but over the years, we've actually made quite a bit of money off the eBay affiliate partner network. You've had AdSense. You have had other sponsorships and other types of things on Sports Card Radio really turn this into a site that has brought in well north of $1 million, probably closer to $2 million in terms of revenue, believe it or not. And a lot of that got started really with the podcast and out of the love of trading cards. And so, here I am again, kind of coming full circle, and we're going to be talking about trading cards and kind of the fun stuff that is going on in this hobby. Some of the fun stuff for me is some of the unique scandals and the angles in trading cards, because look, we spend a lot of money on these cards, whether you're buying into a break or if you're an Anthony Richardson fan or a fan of a certain rookie, you're out there So first of all, you wait for certain sets to come around. You wait for sets like Prizm or Flawless or Contenders or Optic or whatever you're a fan of. You wait for that set to come out, and then the set comes out, and you're either buying into the breaks or you're buying the single cards, you're buying boxes or whatever. You're maybe doing a combination of all of it. And then you finally get your card. You finally get your Anthony Richardson auto. And then a lot of people take the next step, right? And so they take the next step and they send it on to PSA. Maybe it's something they do with most of their cards. Maybe this copy of the Anthony Richardson just looks really nice. And you're like, well, I'm going to send it in and I'm going to get it graded. Well, that's what John Ban237 did on Twitter. And he says, wow, this is crazy shock and breaking news. Says he sent in a month ago an order to PSA, and it was taking longer than it probably should, although PSA has been known to take some time with their cards every once in a while. He says, come to find out, that the Anthony Richardson pulled in the break and submitted by them came back as shown. Panini is being investigated by PSA Card as to fake Anthony Richardson autograph. And so PSA sent back his Anthony Richardson, looks like a silver Prizm from 2023 Prizm football, and it says do not holder. And the explanation that we got from PSA was the autograph might not be real. Now, PSA came back with a statement on Twitter, which I had to switch accounts on from Sports Card Radio to a different one since PSA Card has the Sports Card Radio account blocked on Twitter. That's how long we've been going after this company for their shady practices. They've long had us blocked on Twitter. Now, it says PSA is not currently conducting any form of independent investigation of Panini over the authenticity of the autographs of these particular cards. So PSA comes out with a very lawyer-like first sentence where it says, we are actually not conducting any form of independent investigation. But as PSA will later go on, no, they actually are. So PSA continues, we do evaluate every autograph submitted to PSA for authentication and grading on a case-by-case basis. So what this means is you have an autograph card that you send in to a PSA, unless you are specifically getting it PSA DNA authenticated, they don't always actually look at the autograph. It's actually a case-by-case basis. If there are questions or issues that are flagged with manufacturer distributed autos, we work directly with the manufacturers and athlete representatives in order to confirm authenticity. Guys, to me, that sounds like an independent investigation, right? They say we work directly with manufacturers and athlete representatives in order to confirm authenticity. That sounds like to me, maybe it's not an independent investigation, but you are, as PSA, you are actually taking an extra step there that you don't normally do. This is actually an extra step. PSA says they can confirm that this is the case with multiple variations of Anthony Richardson's sticker autographs that have recently surfaced. We are currently in contact with Panini on this matter. Company later followed up and says, typically, when a card is sent in for authentication grading only, a manufacturer distributed auto is not taken into consideration. So PSA doesn't normally take in authentication when its manufacturer presented autos, like as the case in Panini Prizm. He says there are outlier cases such as this where until we get further clarification on auto authenticity, we will not holder examples of this card that feature a questionable autograph. So the company started by saying that they are not currently conducting any form of independent investigation. And then they later said, until we further get clarification on the auto, we will not holder examples of this card. So PSA, typical fashion, talking out of both sides of their mouths. Rumor has it that if you look at these Anthony Richardson autographs, that one of them could potentially be using an auto pen. An auto pen is a machine where you can essentially program the machine and you put a little pen in it and the machine will it's just like a robotic arm, if you will. It'll just robotically write the autograph as if it's signed. Now, presidents use this. A lot of people that have to sign documents all the time. It is a device that is used. It is a device you can go out and purchase if you want to as well. Now, probably one of the more famous instances of this in the hobby also featured a top prospect quarterback at the time, and that was Dak Prescott. In fact, Dak Prescott was way bigger, way more popular, and way hotter from a hobby perspective than Anthony Richardson ever has or probably ever will be. Dak Prescott was like a sensation in this hobby. And look, he still is a high quality quarterback, although he hasn't really done anything from like a winning a big game perspective, but he's put up a lot of numbers. And it was found that on his Prizm cards, he actually used an auto pen as well. It caused Panini and him to have to get together. They released separate or follow-up autographs to this. Anybody that had a quote auto penned Dak Prescott autograph could send it in and get one of these like real signed Dak Prescott ones that I think feature maybe a hologram or different authentication on the back of the card. Not everybody did that. And so you still actually have auto penned examples of Dak Prescott autographs floating around in the wild. Now, in this case, so what is Panini going to do? They've literally basically been confronted first by a collector, John Bond 237 on Twitter, and most of the accounts that share this type of stuff on Twitter have kind of taken it and run with it. Panini's well aware of that as well. PSA, which rarely makes statements on individual cards, has commented on this card, and they also confirmed that they are working with Panini on a solution to this. So what is Panini going to do, and what do you do if you hold one of these cards? And look, how do you know if you have a real Anthony Richardson autograph and maybe one that is auto penned? Now, I don't have a lot of confidence in Panini. I don't think they're in the financial position a lot of people think they are. I think people think this is a company that's rolling around in lots of money. I don't think that's necessarily the case, because fanatics can come in here and scoop up athletes like Wembanyama and a lot of the top prospects like CJ Stroud. I mean, they got CJ Stroud before CJ Stroud was even really a hot prospect in the NFL to exclusive autograph deals. And so I actually don't think Panini's in a great position to really solve this situation. Now, they obviously can go back to Anthony Richardson, who likely has some kind of affidavit as it relates to signing these cards, and get him to sign replacements, or Panini might work something out. But overall, it is actually a big mess. And some people in this hobby are going to blame the athlete. They're going to blame Anthony Richardson and say, well, how could you not sign your cards? And how could you do this to the hobby and your fans? And people like me are going to probably more or less point to Panini and say, how can you produce a product and actually ship the product, put the product in packaging and sell it, and not know these autographs are authentic and real? How can you call yourself a sports memorabilia company and have time and time again auto-penned examples? And this is just, I mean, there's numerous examples every time we look at athlete signatures, whether it's Luka Doncic or whether it's Patrick Mahomes or whether it's Braun Becker, or time and time again, we look at Panini's signatures on their cards, and they often differ from sometimes the same signature in the same set, sometimes from different eras of that player signing. Panini just does an absolute terrible job of making sure the athlete is actually signing the cards. Now, I understand you can't have a representative there every single time, but guys, we are in the era of every single one of these players has a phone. Can we not Zoom call and authenticate maybe they're signing some of these cards? Can we not set up like you can set up a camera, you can send a very cheap camera with all these cards, set it up in the room and make sure Anthony Richardson is signing. I know that Upper Deck many years ago, that I think they even patented it. It was like a camera in the pen. And so the pen actually had a camera in it to basically add a level of authenticity to Upper Deck authentic items. And out of all the companies out there, I would actually say that Upper Deck, from an authenticity standpoint, is the company where, so I have a motto, like, if you didn't see the athlete sign the card or the piece of memorabilia, well, it's fake. Okay. So that means I have a Kobe Bryant autograph in the safe over here. I have a Tiger Woods autograph in the safe over here. I actually have two Tiger Woods autographs. One Tiger Woods autograph is on an Upper Deck card. I actually consider that fake. I didn't see Tiger Woods sign that card. So I think it's fake. Now it's in a PSA slab and it's from Upper Deck. So 99% certain it probably is real, but I'm not 100% sure. The only Tiger Woods autograph I have that I'm 100% sure he signed was the one that I got back in 1999 in Chicago when I handed him the ticket to the golf event I was at, and he took it out of my hand and he signed it. I saw Tiger sign that, so I know it's real. But I think given that we're paying hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars, oftentimes for the signatures themselves, but even the unopened boxes that these cards are coming in, the level of or the lack of authenticity guarantee that we're getting in the deviation and the variations in signatures that we're seeing across many athletes is very discouraging to me. And my hope is Fanatics figures out, and I don't have any confidence that Fanatics will figure out a way here, but maybe Fanatics can help solve this issue or have some protocols in place so these autographs and these cards don't have questions of authenticity surrounding them. Because again, we have PSA saying that they can't holder these cards until they get further clarification from not only Panini, but also the player representative. And again, PSA being very rich, saying they're not currently conducting an independent investigation, but they've reached out to both Anthony Richardson, his representatives, and Panini. So you can't really believe anything that comes out of these companies' mouth. See what happens here. But obviously, if you have one of these Anthony Richardson autographs, to be honest with you, collectors really don't care. You know what I mean? Like at the end of the day, people are going to pull these Anthony Richardson's autographs, and collectors are going to convince themselves that it's real. So they'll look at 4 different autographs of Luka Doncic and they'll say to themselves, oh, all 4 are real. Or they'll look at 2 completely different signatures of Anthony Richardson, or they'll look at an Anthony Richardson signature on 19 different cards that is literally the exact same pen stroke. Like Anthony Richardson perfectly signed his name identically 100 different times in a row. There are going to be people in this hobby that just convince themselves that that is real. And a lot of the times it's they're a fan of Anthony Richardson. They're a Colts fan. A lot of the times too, they're fanboys of Panini. Like they look at Panini like sneaker collectors look at Nike, or Laker fans look at the Los Angeles Lakers. They are literally basically just a simp fanboy of the manufacturer. You're going to have a lot of people that spent a lot of money on breaks or whatever, and they hit the Anthony Richardson. They hit a big card. So there's no way they're going to want to sit there and believe that it's not the real thing. And then PSA is going to figure out a way to do this the best they possibly can to not smear Panini's reputation, to do it as best as they possibly can, and not actually be that true third-party, independent, investigating authenticator that this hobby actually needs. If PSA had a nutsack between its legs, it would have came out and actually had a firm statement. They're not holding these Anthony Richardson cards. They say they need more information, but at the same time, they say that they're not doing any type of independent investigation. This company should have a nutsack and just say, these are auto-penned, these are fake, these are real. Otherwise, I don't exactly know what good PSA does and what value and service they are providing for your hard-earned money. Now, I think they did a nice job here. They could have just holdered these and nobody would have known the wiser. Again, the fanboys of Panini, the fanboys of Anthony Richardson, the simps, the degenerates, they wouldn't care, okay? They're addicted. So they don't care if these are real or not. They just want to be able to pull this card from the break. They just want to put this card in their collection. They don't care if the card's an 8 and it gets slabbed a 10. They just want a 10. They don't care if the autograph's fake. They just want it slabbed authentic. So hats off to PSA for doing something. But next time, maybe sack up a little bit and put Panini a little bit to the fire, because this is a joke. I mean, I don't, without checking DA Card World or Blowout Sports Cards, I don't know what a 2023 Prizm football box sells for, but I got to imagine it's probably a number close to $1,000 or more for an unopened box. And inside of that unopened box, there's a lot of autographs of top prospect rookies in the NFL that are not in there. And the one that is in there that is exciting to collect is Anthony Richardson. I didn't get a chance to see a lot of his games, just really highlights over the last year, but looks like an exciting player. Certainly has a bright future if he works on his game and he's not out dating, over the hill kind of Instagram models. Well, he could be something. And his autograph is one of the main chases in 2023 Prizm football. And the fact that Panini can't even get the few athletes that they do get to sign for their sets, the few athletes that actually appear in Panini products, Panini can't even get it right. And so while we're certainly not going to sit here and anoint Fanatics as the savior of this hobby, I can't wait until this company from Italy that really can't do anything right, I can't wait until they are gone. Okay, so moving on to our next segment. This involves, again, this goes way back. Those of you that were fans of the podcast probably remember this topic many years ago, 3, 4, 5 years ago. Former BGS employee and current Leaf employee, and currently Joe Clemons, I think, is breaking cards and selling cards on Whatnot. I mean, I know Jeff Wilson is, the only one doing innovative things in retail, but he's selling on Whatnot, and so is Joe Clemons. Well, there was a grading scam several years ago where Joe Clemons and his employer Leaf got we're talking about a massive amount of BGS 10 black labels. And some of you guys are going to say, well, who cares? PSA is the most dominant player in grading today. I think even in second place might even be SGC. And then some people might even say CGC. And I would have never, ever thought that. Certainly back in 2019, I would have never thought back in 2019 that we'd sit here, 4 or 5 years forward, that BGS wouldn't be the top grading company, wouldn't be the second best grading company, and in some circles might not even be the third best grading company. I would have been like, what the heck happened to Beckett, and what the heck happened to this hobby? The fact that in 2019, if you had a modern trading card, if you had any modern trading card, we're talking anything past like 1989, that's basically was quote modern. Anything past that, so that's your Derek Jeter SP rookies, that was your Ken Griffey Jr. Upper Deck rookies, that was any of your Brett Favre rookies. Certainly as we move into more modern stuff, Kobe Bryant rookies, Shaquille O'Neal rookies, move even forward than that, that's all your LeBron James, Carmelo Anthony, Dwayne Wade stuff. That covers that entire era of cards. If you had one of those cards, you sent it to Beckett. Now, if you had a 1960 Mickey Mantle, if you had a 1960 Willie Mays, Pete Rose, whatever you might have had, those tended to go to PSA for whatever reason. They were dominant in vintage. Beckett dominated the modern. Maybe it was the subgrades. Maybe it was the holder. Maybe it was their marketing. Maybe it was the price. I don't know. But Beckett was by far and away the place you sent your modern cards to get graded. And modern was anything made over the past 30 years or so in the hobby. Something changed, and maybe potentially some of it had to do with some of the hanky-panky and the shadiness that was going on over at Beckett Grading. Well, we found out in 2019 that former Beckett employee, Joe Clemons, and these employees in the Texas area, they get passed around. I mean, look at like Tracy Hackler. He started, I think, at Beckett, then he got passed to Panini, then he got passed to that creepy guy, Kentucky Cards, and then he gets passed back to Panini. Same thing with Joe Clemons. Starts out at Beckett, then for whatever reason, he goes over to Leaf, but still maintains that chummy, good old boy network relationship with Beckett. And so he's submitting cards personally. He's also submitting cards on the behalf of Leaf. Now, back in 2019, Joe Clemons earned the nickname Eagle Eye because out of his submission just in 2019, he achieved 139 Black Label 10s, which are apparently the hardest grades to get. Leaf got over 258 Black Labels from Beckett. Some rumors came out over the past week that Joe Clemons would just walk into, forget the back door at these plays. Everybody's talking about, oh, that card went out the back door. That card came out the back door of Topps or the back door of Panini. Forget the back door, guys. Joe Clemons would walk in the front door of Beckett Grading, print out his own labels, and grade his own cards. And that would explain why he got so many BGS Black Label 10s. A lot of these cards were iconic and very valuable at the time, including some Ronald Acuna's, Juan Soto's, Mookie Betts, and even some Shohei Ohtani cards, which are probably still very, very valuable. Brian Gray very quickly and valiantly defended his employee, saying at the time there was basically no evidence of that. Now, over the course of this story breaking, you had eBay seller Brent and Becca. I don't know if they're still selling or not, but at one time they were relatively popular. They said they were offered a guaranteed grade deal from BGS, meaning if they sent in certain amounts of cards, they would get certain grades guaranteed from BGS, no matter the condition of the cards. Now, Joe Clemons did try to defend himself, saying that he would provide his BGS account information to a Blowout Forum member. However, when he provided that information, it only went back to November 2018 and only allowed Black Label data, but did not show pristine 10 cards. So what we're showing you here with Joe Clemons is just his absolute top end Black Label. So over at BGS, you have the Black Label 10s, but they're also BGS 10 pristines, which we will assume Joe Clemons got a lot of. And there's also, at the time, BGS 9.5 Gem Mint. Those cards were highly sought after, highly collectible, and more often than not, actually more valuable than PSA cards graded the same grade. The drama around Clemons did not just end with him grading cards with Beckett and getting an unbelievable, unfathomable amount of high grades. He also took a lot of cards that were meant to be given out at the National Sports Collectors Convention. So every manufacturer, or virtually every manufacturer, tends to have a giveaway at the show. Sometimes it's a pack. Sometimes you have to buy something and you get something. Well, Leaf, being a manufacturer or a distributor of trading cards, if you will, had a promo as well. And back in 2018, Baker Mayfield was all the rage. Johnny Manziel, LiAngelo Ball. These guys were all the rage, and their cards were selling for a lot of money. Well, what ended up happening was Joe Clemons and I believe another employee of Leaf ended up with the vast majority of the one of one and prime hits out of what was meant to be a promotional giveaway. So if you bought a box, so you had to come to the Leaf booth, bought a box of 2018 Leaf in the Game or Leaf Pop Century. So you had to spend your own money, and then you were going to get a pack that contained potentially a Baker Mayfield card, some top rookies from that era. And inside of there were one of one cards, superfractor type gold vinyl cards. Well, what ended up happening is the employee, Joe Clemons, ended up with a lot of the very valuable one-of-one cards. He ended up grading them, and he ended up selling them on his own eBay account, almost like a little bonus or a little homie hookup, if you will, from Leaf. That also caused Brian to change the policy over at Leaf, saying that employees could not, I believe, open and sell Leaf product. Well, again, we found out maybe a year or two after this, employees at Leaf were still opening and selling exclusive cards from Leaf. So it clearly not a lot of enforcement as it relates to that. But Joe Clemons has a very, very shady past as it relates to this hobby. And we brought that up on our Thursday night live stream last week. Well, Brian Gray messaged me. Brian and I have a direct line of communication, and it's still friendly, and it is always friendly. I don't think I'm going to get in a huge argument with Brian. Now, I can criticize the way he did things at Leaf. I can criticize things about Joe Clemons. I can talk about some of the shadiness that Joe Clemons has been involved in. I can talk about some of the shadiness that Leaf and Joe Clemons has been involved in. I think we can all look at the 2019 data as it relates just to black labels. Because, guys, if we put BGS 10 pristines on here and BGS 9.5s in here, it probably paints an even uglier story and a more improbable story that one man and one company can get so many grades. And the fact that the one man also used to work for that grading company, it just really puts this air, like just this dark cloud over the situation. Even if there's no hanky panky going on, everyone has to admit, to even Brian Gray, has to admit there is some smoke here. Whether or not there's full-blown forest fire going on, that Joe Clemons is walking in the front door at Beckett and submitting his own cards, or that he has the homie hookup deal and whatever he submits or Leaf submits or Brian Gray submits automatically gets stamped 10s and BGS black labels. We don't know. But there's definitely some smoke here. When you look at the data, you look at the track record, you look at the reputation of these guys, there's a track record. We can talk about all of this, and we can do it in a way where Brian and I can still be friendly, because in business, there is actually nothing personal. Just like Brian can go on other programs and be like, the Sports Card Radio guys go over the top when they say this. They sound racist when they say this. They sound misogynistic when they do this. Totally fine. In a lot of ways, maybe I would agree with them. And probably there's people in my family that would agree with them as well. But at the end of the day, business is business. So Brian Gray messaged me and had a short comment. I do have it on my phone. I know this makes for just fantastic radio where I am pulling up my phone, but I want to give Brian some justice here and read his statement word for word. So exclusive here at Sports Card Radio, exclusive statement from Brian Gray as it relates to the Joe Clemons 2019 BGS 10 black labels. Brian Gray says, quote, "Listen to the video." That refers to our Thursday night video. He says, "The grader," which he put in quotes, said he heard that rumor on Blowout. He had no proof of anything. It's just not true, as much as it would be great content if it were. Brian continues. The Leaf black labels were substantially Valiant football and baseball from which over 200,000 cards were cherry-picked. 30,000 were graded with 200 black labels. 200 out of 200,000 is probably low, according to Brian. Now, couple things here. I'll certainly agree that cards were cherry-picked because, as I just showed you, employees at Leaf, including Joe Clemons, were able to cherry-pick the best cards from a 2018 National Sports Collectors Convention promo. Now, this also doesn't really make a lot of sense because, as Brian says, that they quote cherry picked out of 200,000 cards. Okay, guys, first of all, think about how many cards. We're talking about 200,000 cards. So Brian is trying to claim that him, Joe Clemons, and presumably maybe other employees at Leaf went through one by one, meticulously looking at 200,000 cards, and they were able to cherry pick out the best cards out of 200,000 cards and be able to send those into Beckett. I just want you guys to think about that for a moment. Think how long it would take you to meticulously look, even if you were only spending 15, 30 seconds, 60 seconds per card to meticulously look it over and see if it could obtain a black label. We're talking about 200,000 cards. This, and again, this is an employee that probably has a family, if not has a family, has some kind of life outside of meticulously looking at 200,000 cards. He probably has other duties that he needs to do at Leaf. Am I right? He probably is designing sets, doing marketing stuff, contacting suppliers, contacting distributors, contacting customers, doing customer support, doing website stuff, doing marketing stuff. Are we really, really, really saying that Leaf has the manpower and the amount of time it would take to meticulously look through 200,000 cards? I just don't see it. Imagine putting we're talking about you have a 3,200 count box on your desk. Imagine this is 3,200 cards. We're not talking about 32,000 cards. We're talking about 3,200 cards. Imagine having to pick every single one of them out and meticulously looking at them and imagining how long that would take. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me from a time perspective. Doesn't make a lot of sense from a business perspective, because let's say that you are able to meticulously look over 200,000 cards. How much are you paying those employees to meticulously look at those cards? It probably actually isn't worth it, even if you're getting black labels at a high degree. Is it worth it from a time perspective? Since you're playing Joe Clemons 15, 16, 17, 18, 25, $30 per hour to look at those cards on top of Social Security taxes, payroll taxes, potentially healthcare. You are having to rent an office building, maybe a microscope for him to look at these cards. It doesn't make any sense. Is it even humanly possible to meticulously look at 200,000 cards? And again, in a short period of time, because Beckett was making these cards, quickly getting them graded, and they would end up either for sale, they would end up in a repack product, they would end up on the market very soon after the set was released. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. What makes more sense is that Joe Clemons used to work at Beckett. He has a relationship still there. Does he walk in the front door and print out his own labels? I don't know. But he used to work there. Now he works at Leaf. Does it make more sense? Does it actually make more sense? Instead of meticulously looking at 200,000 cards and paying those employees by the hour to do that, or does it make it more sense, if you're Brian Gray, to hire somebody that used to work at Beckett, that has a relationship with somebody that works there? And all the smoke and fire points to the fact that Beckett has given preferential grading treatments, have offered preferential grading to sellers like Brent and Becca, who have publicly stated this on forums and on Twitter, saying that Beckett does give preferential treatment to people let alone former employees, does it make more sense that you would go through hundreds and hundreds of 32 count boxes looking at every card meticulously, or you had a homie hookup at BGS? Maybe that's one of the reasons why Beckett has fallen off from a grading perspective. Again, not that PSA doesn't have homie hookups. I don't know if you guys have ever looked at Nat Turner submissions. He can submit cards that were dropped on the ground and have rounded corners and get tens. But Beckett certainly has had their reputation bruised and damaged over the past couple of years. And I think some of it has to do with this Joe Clemons situation. Some of it has to do with the fact that they let the fire and the smoke continue to smolder and the tinder continue to burn over there, instead of nipping this in the bud right in the beginning and actually addressing the questions and concerns collectors had from day one. We are still getting explanations from Brian Gray sent to us here at Sports Card Radio, which again don't make sense and actually don't really make me not believe that something shady happened here. In fact, when Brian Gray sends me over something saying that he meticulously looked through 200,000 trading cards by hand, it actually makes me believe more that Joe Clemons has got some hanky-panky stuff going on, and by connection, so has Leaf. Now, speaking of hanky-panky, moving on to our next topic, Mr. Slick Rick Probstein 123 himself. Is he selling fake cards again? As I said at the top, pretty sure you could send Rick Probstein a fake autograph in a fake slab and a fake card, and he would list it for sale. He wouldn't care. He's just getting his commission off of you. And that really is what appears to be the case here. Xavier Leggett signed 2023 Contenders rookie ticket auto, graded PSA DNA 10 autograph. The problem is when you type in the serial number on the card, it takes you to PSA certification verification of Jordan Walker. So I think definitely what we have here is a fake slab. I don't know why you would do it with Xavier Leggett, but maybe you're getting away with it on these lower end cards. And because they've essentially ripped off the certification number from a Jordan Walker card, which again appears on the PSA website. Also, another account on eBay called Ultimate Sports Marketing has about a little over 1,000 feedback on eBay. Interestingly enough, he has listed and sold this card a few different times. In fact, he has it listed now for $99 plus $6 shipping, despite the fact that Probstein just recently sold this for $32 plus $5 shipping. Just goes to show you guys, now you need, not that you need to go out there and cross-reference every single certification number that you get to. Certainly, as my brother and I are buying, quote, lower end autograph cards and trading cards, and certainly a $32 card plus $5 shipping could be considered a relatively low dollar trading card. Doesn't mean that you need to go out there and cross-reference every single, card that you buy. But what it certainly does mean is whether you're buying from Probstein, whether you're buying from Golden, whether you're buying on eBay, you're buying on Check Out My Cards, anything of any real significant value, I would absolutely be cross-referencing that, because Rick Probstein, like we said, is Mr. Slick Rick. He really doesn't care what he's selling you, and it's really on you to decide if this card is authentic and real. And after further review, certainly doesn't seem to be the case. Just a quick segment there, as anytime we can take a dig at one of these consignment sellers, we certainly would. Now, next segment, we have Sports Card Invest, not Sports Card Invest Store, who maybe we'll touch on a little bit in this segment. We have Sports Card Invest. Now, this is the guy, if you watch our videos, on Sports Card Radio. I don't know if we paid the clip more recently, but he's the guy that says,
so we spent about $50,000 on 2 James Harden cards. That's right.
So this is one of these little kids that just started collecting over the past couple of years. Well, he has a website, sportscardinvest.com, and he has membership programs available. So I definitely wanted to make you all aware of these membership offers, since you might want to get in on this. Take a look at this, guys. You've got the ultra high-end yearly membership. Folks, this used to be $3,099. I know that inflation has been a hot topic here in the United States and really across the world, but man, nearly $400 a month to get sports card picks. Well, guys, now the low price of just $19.99, and that is $1,999. You will get weekly reports from this so-called expert. You're going to get 3 $10,000 picks per week. Reports will be released on Sundays. Monthly 30-minute phone calls for guys. For $2,000, you're going to get a 30-minute phone call to discuss investment strategies with Sports Card Invest. That is only $2,000 per year. Now, let's say you're not in that stratosphere. Well, there's a platinum membership for you guys. Regular price of $1,000, now down to just $695. You're going to get 3 high-end cards that I believe will go up. That's according to Sports Card Invest. You are also going to get your 30-minute phone calls, and you are going to get his phone number and contact and ask questions whenever you have. Sounds like individual investment advice, which we'll talk about here in a second. Now, on the lower end, though, you can get a monthly membership, regularly $15, all the way down to $6.99. You're going to get a weekly report. 10 cards, I believe, will go up in value. I don't know why I'm paying $1,000 for weekly reports when I can just pay $6.99. 10 cards he believes should be sold. I don't know. Seems like every card you should have sold over the last couple of years. 3 long-term underground NBA investments. This is going to be run through his private Instagram. That'll be every Monday. And again, that is just $6.99 per month. He's got baseball. He's got Pokemon. He's got soccer. He's got some other things here. He says he's really only been investing in sports cards for 8 years, and that I invest in basketball primarily. Yet he has a soccer monthly membership, Pokemon, and baseball. So he admittedly only has been collecting cards for 8 years, or investing in trading cards for 8 years. Apparently that allows him to sell you $2,000 a yearly membership. He's also on record of purchasing James Harden cards at the top, among other cards at the top, for astronomical sums that we'll just never going to see ever again. Self-admittedly a basketball guru, but yet has baseball, Pokemon, and soccer memberships. And if you need one, keep calm and collect in sports cards. Not invest in sports cards. You got to pay $2,000 to learn how to invest in cards, but you can buy his t-shirt for the low price of just $19.99. He says he spends hours each day researching the market for my members. That's probably because he's still living at home with his mom and dad in the basement. Now, a couple of big red flags here is the fact that he is selling investment advice. And if you spend any amount of time researching selling investment advice, it's actually a highly regulated industry. Now, as it pertains to the stocks, if he was doing this with stocks, if he had this ultra high-end yearly membership, and this was for, instead of Sports Card Invest, it was Stock Market Invest, he wouldn't have a big problem with the weekly reports, even his $10,000 picks. But those monthly 30-minute phone calls, those would certainly come under investigation from the SEC almost immediately. You cannot provide individual investing advice. He can say, I think Tom Brady is going to go up. I think Aaron Rodgers cards are going to go down. But if I call Sportscardinvest on one of these 30-minute phone calls and I ask him, what should I do with my Aaron Rodgers cards? And he tells me what to do with my Aaron Rodgers cards and I pay him, well, he has just committed securities fraud and would likely be indicted by either the DOJ, the SEC, potentially both. He would face fines and penalties and potentially jail time. Now, if you read through the SEC's documents, they do say that collectibles and other alternative investments, he's certainly selling this as an investment. If I was this young man who has only been investing in sports cards for 8 years, he needs to look at the legality of what he's doing here. First of all, he's charging abnormally high prices for this type of thing. He's also providing personal access as it relates to phone calls, direct messages, those types of things. If he is providing individual advice to people that are paying him, he is actually committing a crime. Now, is the SEC, the DOJ, are they going to come knocking on his door anytime soon? Well, don't tempt them and don't be surprised if one day they do. Even with disclaimers like no investments made are guaranteed to see profits and members invest at their own risk. That disclaimer does not cover you from clearly defined rules as it relates to providing investment advice, paid investment advice to people on a personal level. Now, if it's free, if my buddy calls me up for free, which often happens, and says, hey, I have these Joe Montana cards or I have these Michael Jordan cards, what should I do with them? And I tell him what to do with them, there's nothing wrong with that. But if I'm like, well, buddy, you got to pay me $4.99 per month for me to tell you what to do with your Joe Montana cards, well, I have just committed a crime. Now, I also don't think these services are needed, because when you look at the major indexes for trading cards, whether it's modern, high pop, hockey, wrestling, football, low pop, mid end, high end, mid pop, pre-war, soccer, racing, baseball, football, basketball, golf, Marvel, whatever it is, it's all down over the last year. And I think if we've learned anything over the past couple of years as it relates to trading cards kind of going up and down in value, it's actually nothing that you can actually predict. Because if you look at Patrick Mahomes, who's done absolutely everything required to make his cards go up in value, he continues to win. He continues to be the leader of a team that is now maybe as popular or maybe more popular than it ever has. He's on a pace that we really have never seen before in terms of going to and winning Super Bowls. He often wins these games in spectacular fashion and is often the centerpiece and the reason why, or the big reason why, his team wins. And yet, if you look at Patrick Mahomes' trading cards, they don't continue to go up and up and up. Other, quote, no-brainer generational talents like Luka Doncic. I mean, you guys were all just slurping over this guy just a couple of years ago. And by all accounts, I saw him score 70 some odd points in an NBA game, which is just absolutely fantastic for a white guy that looks completely out of shape and has a 6-inch vertical. Looks like to me his trading cards haven't done a darn thing in response to that. So you have fantastic individual performance, like from Luka. You have fantastic individual and team performance as it relates to Patrick Mahomes, and it is not translating onto the cards going up in value. So I really don't know, for somebody especially that has only been investing in trading cards for the past 8 years, what they offer me for $2,000 per year if on-field performance, both individual and team, and sometimes combined, doesn't lead to the cards actually going up in value. I don't think anyone has any idea what cards are going to do, which cards are popular, The only thing that is certain from a quote sports card investing strategy is when the card goes up, you should sell it. When the popularity of a set, when the popularity of a card, when the popularity of anything in the card hobby goes up, you should sell it. Now you start stretching things out to the longer term. I really don't think it's very complicated. You look at the long-term trajectory of thing like classic Mickey Mantle cards, classic Michael Jordan cards, certainly maybe even like Kobe Bryant cards, certainly other athletes as there, Willie Mays, Jackie Robinson, those types of cards. In the short term, I don't think anyone can kind of predict the up or down movement in those cards. And certainly when you have bubbles and acceleration of demand, those card values will go up just like everybody else's. But over the longer term, 20 years, 30 years, I think we've certainly seen the absolute studs and the stars of the game. Their cards tend to hold their value, if not continue to go up. But the key is, I think if I were to give you, again, I'm not charging you for this, but if I were to give one advice to somebody that wants to have a safe full of cards that appreciates over a long period of time, is when everybody and their brother, including little boys that still live at home with their mom, that says they've made 300,000 in profit in just the past 12 months with no proof, saying that they've only collect basketball cards and they've really only done that for 8 years. When guys like this are telling you to buy, you really should be selling. When the popularity of trading cards gets really high and everybody from Gary V to Vegas Dave are collecting cards, that's your time to sell. And then when cards get a little less popular and they fall out of favor, it's actually a great time to buy. And that's why, which we'll talk about here in a moment, we've been buying a little bit more heavily over the past 12 months or so. Now, should you be buying a lot of these prospects? As I talked about, or I will talk about, the upcoming NFL draft, which is, I think, just a couple of months away, a couple of weeks away, maybe even. You're going to have a sensational class here as it relates to rookies. Now, how many of them will end up in Panini products with autographs? How many of them will end up with Fanatics with exclusive autograph deals? All that remains to be seen. And all of these guys by now have had college and collegiate autographs. And so a lot of their stuff, by the time they go public, especially with this NIL stuff and the fact that these guys can sign and make money at a much earlier age, it's all going to get watered down by the time that they finally become an NFL prospect. But that shouldn't diminish the fact that we've got a fantastic NFL draft in our hands. You're going to have a quarterback pick number 1, 2, and probably 3. And then the 4th pick, Marvin Harrison Jr., obviously has the pedigree from his father being a fantastic NFL player. And just, if you watched any Ohio State games, the guy was like NFL caliber in college. You have other quarterbacks as well, which certainly maybe not as high regard as the top 3, but you got national champion, which will get a lot of attention. You've got Bo Nix, who some people think has a high ceiling, maybe has a really low floor as well, but could have a high ceiling. So you're going to have a ton of new prospects come in. Every breaker and their brother are going to be pulling on those latex gloves and trying to sell you every last set that comes out, and is going to try to convince you that Caleb Williams won't be Justin Fields, Drake May won't be Baker Mayfield, Jaden Daniels is not going to turn into Joey Arrington, Michael Phoenix is not going to be like Johnny Manziel, Bo Nix is certainly not going to be Sam Darnold, and on and on and on and on again. So all of these guys are going to be pumped up, and as they should. They're new. If you're a fan of these teams, it's kind of a way to start new. It's something to get excited about. Your team might not be in line to compete with the Chiefs or the 49ers or the Bengals or the Eagles or any of these top teams, but you've got a new player to watch, a new jersey to buy, and it's exciting because, as we saw this year, CJ Stroud came into a Texans organization, which really hasn't been able to do much really since, even with Deshaun Watson, they didn't do a whole lot. And it's an organization that really has never really won anything in particular. But CJ Stroud took this team to the playoffs. I believe they ended up winning a game. Well, that could all be a falling apart, guys, because he is now hanging out with the Travis Scotts and the Kardashians, and the Kardashians are just a wasteland as it relates to Ben Simmons, Kyle Kuzma, Blake Griffin, Devin Booker, Chris Humphries, Tristan Thompson, Reggie Bush, on and on and on and on. Anybody that the Kardashians get within arm's length of their career. I mean, look at Lamar Odom. Lamar Odom almost freaking died because he was with a Kardashian. And so the fact that CJ Stroud is hanging out in that same type of company and that same circle should have people extremely concerned. I would be selling CJ Stroud cards as fast as I got them in. He is now hanging out with a completely over the hill and absolutely disgusting Amber Rose, who is 40 years old. CJ just 22 years old. This guy could have his pick of Instagram models and celebrities, and he's hanging out with washed up pieces of garbage. So we've got an Amber Alert for CJ Stroud. You don't have to pay $2,000 a year for an ultra high-end membership over at Sportscardinvest. All you have to do is come to TMZ and see the hottest quarterback in the game hanging out with an over-the-hill menopause on the verge celebrity reject as it relates to Amber Rose. Absolutely not looking good for CJ Stroud. On top of that, you've got all these other quarterbacks which are going to be getting all the attention. I would be selling CJ Stroud cards as fast as I possibly could. Now, finally, to close things out, some of the things that we've been buying. And now you're not going to see this everywhere, guys. Okay. Everybody's going to be telling you to be buying these sports cards, which again, I went over. You have great individual performance like Luka, and you go down the board. There's been a lot of great individual performance, and the card values haven't moved. You look at great individual performance combined with team performance over with Patrick Mahomes. His cards also have barely moved. And you also have to keep this in context, guys. If you buy a card and you're going to resell it, typically you're going to be selling it on eBay, or maybe you're going to send it to Golden. These guys and these websites take a cut. And so even if Patrick Mahomes cards after the Super Bowl go up 15, 20%, even 25, 30%, after you factor in your fees, after you factor in, I guarantee you none of you guys are paying income taxes, but if you did have to pay income taxes, particularly if you live in a high income tax state like California, well, now Patrick Mahomes cards, yes, they went up 20%, but after I factor all that in, I made maybe 2 or 3% on the sale of that. And so really, in my opinion, you really got to start looking elsewhere. And one thing that I love is I love brands. Okay. And Louis Vuitton is one of the premier brands in the world. Now, is it as exclusive as like Chanel? Is it exclusive as Hermes? Is it exclusive as maybe some of these other brands? No, it's a more approachable brand. It's very much like as Mercedes is to Lamborghini, or BMW is to maybe like Rolls-Royce. Louis Vuitton is more like Mercedes. It's more like Porsche. You can go around, and most of the Louis Vuitton bags I see ladies have, they're fake. And it's pretty easy to tell. Once you hang out in a Louis store enough and you spend enough money on Louis, you can tell most of the bags you see are fake. Now, if you hang out in Los Angeles, you hang out in a high wealth neighborhood, you're going to see a lot of real ones. But most of the ones that I see where I live, they're actually fake, which there's nothing wrong with that other than it being illegal and those types of things. I would never buy counterfeit Louis Vuitton stuff. But this was interesting. So you have this 25th anniversary miniature Windows computer. So this thing is a really oddball item. It's actually like a miniature computer, and it actually just kind of looks like a little satchel, with the Daimler print on it. And it has this battery. It comes with maybe some manuals. It comes with a plug. I don't know if it actually still works. But what I did notice is it ended for $488. And if you go over to eBay, there's been a few of these that have actually sold, I think for as high as $700, but those were in Japan. And so I think being here in the United States, small markup on this. I also noticed that on Poshmark, where a lot of Louis, like secondhand Louis stuff gets sold, I think the lowest price was like $1,500. So people value this quite a bit. I think we're going to be able to net 580, 600. So we're going to be able to make maybe $180 to $100 on an item like this. And I think we'll probably do it in pretty short order. Here's more of a passion purchase. You've got Pearl Jam, which is certainly from a rock band perspective, the band that I've seen the most in concert, and certainly has a huge influence on my life and just growing up and upbringing. This signed, it looks like a drum tambourine kind of thing. Also signed by Sonic Youth. Now it only has Pearl Jam, Eddie Vedder, and Mike McCready, which just happens to be my two favorite members of the Pearl Jam crew. But I tell you what, something just signed by Eddie Vedder, which I do have. I have a beautifully framed autograph of his. That those can just approach 700. Now I know sometimes getting other people and certainly mixing it with Sonic Youth a little odd, but interestingly enough, I don't know if we'll sell this item. This item might just go into the vault and just kind of sit there for a while. Ryan and I might not sell this. But Pearl Jam just announced a new album. They are going to start touring here in the next couple of months. Anytime Pearl Jam, not popular anymore from a popular music standpoint. Like I doubt any song from their latest radio or their latest album is going to make it on like the hit 100 radio station. They just don't create hit music from a pop perspective anymore. But from a touring band perspective, this is a band just like Foo Fighters and just like some of these bands that are still around since the late 90s, incredibly popular still from a touring perspective. They can sell out large stadiums, and I'll probably attend a show or two. And so you tend to have anytime Pearl Jam is not going to make any waves from radio, from interviews. They're not going to do anything like provocative that other bands and other artists do, but they will get in the news when they tour, and they're about to do a new tour, and their memorabilia might get a slight bump. If we try to sell this, I would try to net about 1,000, and then you'd make about 270 over, a short period of time. Finally, again, we're focusing on other stuff here because again, the sports card market is just so up and down, and it doesn't really matter about performance, individual or team. It's unpredictable, to be honest with you. But I think we can all agree music is one of those things. It's just timeless. It's just, you have the Taylor Swift quote effect as it relates to the NFL. And, she brought brought maybe a certain legion of fans into the NFL atmosphere, certainly the Kansas City Chiefs, certainly Travis Kelce, who was well known in a sports perspective. Now, Travis Kelce is well known everywhere. And so music, kind of really transforms or transcends a lot of things. Obviously, one of the most transcendent artists of all time is Eminem. This just happens to be the second one of these that we have purchased. It's a first pressing vinyl record. My guess is these were pressed and Eminem signed them as related to maybe some kind of maybe it was a charity thing. I don't know the origins of this, but this is actually the second one we've bought. Now we have one that has a Beckett letter of authenticity that we purchased for $7.94. We also have a PSA DNA one of these, which is in the safe over here. I think we paid closer to $1,000 for that one. I actually like this. Okay. First of all, I like this longer term. Eminem, I hope he lives a long life. But if you look at Michael Jackson, look at Prince, look at any artist out there, very few live to an old age. And Eminem's one of those guys where wouldn't be surprised you wake up one day and he's no longer with us. Certainly don't wish that upon him. I think he's got extreme amount of talent that he can continue to share with his fans, and I hope he does so. but I wouldn't be surprised. So I don't mind having something like this stored away for a long period of time. You look at like Kurt Cobain autographs, obviously any of these big major celebrities, once they pass away, can start going up $7,000-10,000 for their signature. I like having two of something because I absolutely want to keep one of these for the long term. Just looks great on the wall, but I wouldn't mind selling one of these either, getting 1,100-1,200 bucks, making a quick $300-400 on it. And that is what we're going to do there. Now, we do put our money where our mouth is. We bought this George Jones signed autograph CD. We picked this up from a Golden auction, and I like buying this stuff on Golden because the vast majority of buyers on Golden are looking for Kobe's and Jordans and CJ Strouds, and they're looking for the stuff that Sportscardinvest is telling you to buy. Okay. That's the Golden buyer. That's why you can get this Louis computer for probably $100 less than what it really should have sold for. You can get a Pearl Jam tambourine or Pearl Jam autograph for probably $100 or $200 less than what it normally would sell for. Same thing with an Eminem album. And we picked this George Jones. This was framed CD. This was only 80 bucks. And I just peeled this off on eBay for 199 plus shipping. After all the fees and everything, it was almost exactly a double. So we made $80 off of $80. So that's 100% margins. Again, there's a lot of people in this hobby that are out there chasing 10%, 20% comps. They'll go to a card show and they'll pay you for a card that sells regularly for 100. They'll pay you $80 for it. And they're comfortable making 20. I'm here to tell you that is not a long-term sustainable business model. There is no and I'm not talking about just sports cards. I'm talking about anywhere. I really don't see a lot of profit there where you're constantly just making that smaller margin. Some people might point to like maybe the used car business. Potentially you could make 5, 10, 15% in the used car business, but we're talking about you don't have to sell tens of thousands of cars per month. You're talking about making 10% on a $40,000, $30,000 vehicle. That obviously can add up very quickly. You can also point to real estate. House flippers sometimes operate at a pretty low margin. But again, we're talking about $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 houses. When we're talking about $20, $30, $50, $100 trading cards, 20% margin, 30% margins, especially when you have selling fees, operational fees, pick packing, shipping fees, all those types of fees, it's just not high enough to move the needle from you wealth wise. Now, 100% margins, obviously going to be a little bit more harder to come by, but they are out there if you know where to look. And on top of that, this was the easiest thing in the world to list because you literally buy it over here on Golden, copy and paste the photos. I literally copied and pasted the description and you press list and you make 100% markup on something. And this sold actually, we bought this actually a while ago, but I didn't actually get to listing it until maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. So this lasted just a couple of weeks before it was sold. Well, folks, that was my return to the long form podcast format here at Sports Card Radio. Again, those of you that got back into Sports Card when Sportscardinvest started dropping $50,000 on James Harden cards. I know this guy says he's made, and some of you guys are going to be like, well, Colin, in the past 12 months, my boy Ajula has made $300,000 profits in just the past 12 months. Well, unfortunately, he lost like $3 million during the pandemic. So of his parents' money. So the 300,000 is just getting him back to makeup with his mommy and daddy. So, but those of you that just got back into cards when these guys like Jeff Wilson and Sportscardinvest told you to get back in, we've been doing this for a long period of time. If you ever want to go back to the show archives, we have them here on sportscardradio.com. Seems like the last show I ended on was 237, but these go back obviously many years. We're talking well north of about, 15, 16 years or so. And those of you that say we only put up negative content over here at Sports Card Radio and we only talk crap on people, Guys, that's because for over a decade, I gave you early previews of 2009 baseball products and grading cards, selling cards, tips for buying low, buy, sell, or hold. I interviewed people, talked about Magic Johnson rookie cards, allocated product. I mean, nobody was talking about allocated product back in 2008, but that's what we were talking about on our program. Guys, the Sports Card Show and Sports Card Radio continues to live on and thrive. And it was a pleasure having you here today. I'll be back some other time, some other place. Let me know down in the comments what you think about any of the topics that we had, maybe any suggestions you have for the programs, any topics of interest for you. Until next time, thanks for tuning in. But for now, we're out of here.